Asked Commissioner Kerr to give us a thought and or prayer, so we'll turn the time over to him.
Okay. So just wanted to share a short thought. We're approaching the bidecennial anniversary of September 11th. It's a little crazy to think about that 20 years ago we kind of awoke to a rather grim reality. And I'm sure that we'll have plenty of opportunities to commemorate some of the negative experiences or memories or emotions that came out of that. I just thought that today I'd share a little nugget that perhaps we can also consider the positives that grew out of that. On September 11th, in an unprecedented move, the FAA shut down airspace. In fact, the president, and I didn't know this until I had watched a documentary, the president gave an order authorizing the military to shoot down civilian planes that didn't respond quickly enough. And luckily, they didn't have to take that measure, but yeah, he gave an order. And so planes were rerouted immediately. I'm sure some of you may have even experienced that. I've heard stories from bosses or colleagues who were stranded in different locations. Well, there was a flight, Continental Flight 5 from London to Houston, and en route they have to fly over Newfoundland. Well, they were rerouted to a little town in Newfoundland named Gander, spelled the common Gander. Some of you may be familiar with this story. I wasn't until this year. There's actually a musical about it. It is. It's really good. Yeah. So they were rerouted to Gander, and in a town of 10,000 people, they suddenly had 7,000 newbies show up. And so in a moment of significant humanity, this town opened their arms. They opened their doors. They had complete strangers come into their homes. They gave up blankets. They gave up beds. They sacrificed a lot during the 5-day lockdown. And I mean, it's just amazing that in a time of emergency, we saw some of the best of humanity. And that's how humanity can respond to trauma. So it's great to commemorate 9/11. It's also great to commemorate 9/12.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'll do a quick prayer.
Okay.
I guess.
Yep.
Father in heaven, we're very grateful for our opportunity to come together as a planning commission. We ask for thy blessing and guidance as we move through the agenda. We also ask a blessing upon our leaders and those who support them. We say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks for that. All right, let's move along to the first item on our agenda. We have an administrative decision scheduled for a public hearing. This is a conceptual site plan, amended conceptual site plan for the ACC Auto Truck World, 155 South Frontage Road. We'll turn the time over to Corey.
Thank you, Chair Daly, members of the commission. Rather than go line by line through the report, I think you've had a little bit of time to look at it, so to be more proficient, just kind of a setup. And then I believe passed to your dais, you should see an updated plan from the applicants so that you can compare that they've had some time to review the staff report and try to respond to it. So I'm going to leave the details for them to respond. Just by way of just setting it up for approval, you're aware that this was the former existing Land Rover site. Historically, the entire piece of property was split into 2 dealerships. I believe another dealership was on a preliminary table. I think it was a Honda dealership. So you're going to have a Land Rover dealership and a Honda dealership. I don't know whether Land Rover was the original, but there was 2 dealership sites proposed. The Land Rover did develop, and the other site did not develop as originally intended. Through time, Land Rover has made some changes. Now, this is before a lot of the current ordinances that we have today. Land Rover developed. They came in with an expansion, partially parking, and also addition to the building. And that triggered at that time, the commission reviewed it, that triggered coming up to standards to the new code. So we call those other nonconformities. When we're dealing with parking, landscaping, signage, lighting, whatever it may be other than the use and the structure, we call those other nonconformities, and that triggered an upgrade to look at some internal landscaping for the site and kind of bring it up to the site development standards of the current code. They received approval from the Planning Commission to do so. It was a partial expansion. They did receive a phased approval for the last remaining portion. If you look in the history of the approvals, they granted the expansion but conditioned that the next phase would come back into the Planning Commission for review to complete it. So we're bringing that back because we're finishing that final phase of the project. Recognizing a lot of it is developed, staff took a step back and said, we're kind of finalizing the whole property. And so we've got to look at what the approvals were of the past, what the upgrades need to take place. A lot of them did take place with this other phased approval, but we need to take a step back and look at the whole site, make sure that we accomplished what was intended. And so my report took a step back and started addressing it. Do we have the overall on-site landscaping percentage? Do we have the overall now parking lot and its internal landscaping? Do we have what's needed to complete the site to bring it up to the current standards? And a lot of that during the initial report was to be determined because we had their expansion part, but we didn't really have a whole tabulation of the entire site. And I think that's what their resubmittal to you tonight is trying to address the entire site. One of the unique things that I think has been a little bit difficult in the phasing project is that we have required internal parking lot landscaping, and we also have required aisle dimensions and parking counts associated with that. And that's been a little bit problematic in trying to assess because they have, if you will, if you counted all the display area, they have more than enough parking. So it's not about the number of parking, it's about the calculation of what is the actual parking count. So we cover the gross square footage of the building, which we would be able to do. And do we cover the patron parking, customer parking, which is one space per 10 displayed vehicles? And we likely have enough parking, depending on how you ratio the display areas with the customer parking. And so that's what I think is a little bit complicated. I try to point to you in the definitions of what our parking lot is. And so we're going to measure the parking lot internal landscaping against where is the customer parking for the building and the users and the employees. And then we measure the drive aisles and the parking stall widths against what that required parking is. As to the display area and drive aisles of the display area, it's somewhat irrelevant. It's nice that they provide drive aisles so they can get their own cars in and out of the display areas, but that's not where the widths are. If they want to park them one after another and pigeon the cars in, I'm exaggerating, but it's so be it. It's a display area. It's just devoted to display. You park as many cars as you can in your display area against the count of one stall per 10 vehicles. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a little complicated, and that was like that step back to where do we want to put the patron and customer parking and employee, where do we want to put the display areas, then let's measure the landscaping accordingly. Another place that was a little bit complex is that you have I call it the eastern Utah shape cut that's the residential zone right adjacent to it. Mostly it's the detention area. We do require a 30-foot buffer to buffer against residential, so commercial is obligated to buffer itself against the residential. Obviously, the detention basin is going to function there, but the original plan was to flush out, okay, how much of that is needed for the on-site landscaping, because we have plant requirements and tree requirements, and then how much of that detention area is beyond the required, and what material do they want to maintain that detention basin with? Because it could be gravel and landscape fabric or something of that nature rather than turf and additional plantings. And so that was a little bit dicey in the original plan to try to parse out. The other thing was the city engineer just wanted to see the calculations. He did receive later the calculations that they provided. Just note, we let the applicant know, the designer, Mr. Flint, know that there's a parent contract between CW Land, which owns the residential piece. If you remember, that's the Lane project that got a conceptual approval. They have some detention needs. They've reached an agreement, from what our understanding is, with the Truck World owner to use the overflow as part of the detention. So they probably have enough area. We just need to make sure that all the calculations and that agreement are accommodated for the detention and stormwater runoff. Other than that, I'm just going to kind of leave it. I provided you 2 recommendations because we had the lot of to be determines, and I think I've learned a little bit from the personality of this commission that if there's way too many to be determines, that doesn't make this group very comfortable to move forward. Because really, the purpose is it feasible to develop this? And if there's too many to be determines, that makes Planning Commission a bit uncomfortable. But at the same time, I provided an option to maybe move forward because we really are filling out the 3rd phase, if you will. So it's not starting from a raw place. We kind of know the direction. So I provided 2 motions to you. Obviously, we can hear from the applicant tonight on how they tried to answer those to be determines. And so we'll just kind of, if you're okay with it, I'll stop there and let you engage with the applicant if you want to, unless you have some specific questions first for me.
Yeah, let's start with that. Does anybody have any questions for Corey?
Corey,
Go ahead.
based on the new site landscape plans that we have sitting in front of us today, which were not included with the packet, have you looked at those plans and compared it against your required landscaping summary and the staff report? How many of the TBDs have they answered through this site plan?
I've not done a thorough review because I'm seeing it for the first time
Okay.
tonight. You know, if I were just to take a guess, it looks like they're addressing a lot of it. But I think the issue of just checking the parking, the drive aisles, the counts, I haven't had a chance to go through and verify that, so.
Thank you.
So for clarification, you want to go?
Yeah, 2 questions. So interior landscape, I don't see on this one any interior landscape islands, and maybe that's part of your TBD review process. I need to look at what our code requires. And then the second question is, how often do we see shared detention basins or facilities within the city in past projects?
Yeah.
And I guess we're okay with that in some instances if you're bringing it up, so long as the overall detention is met for both projects.
Right.
So I guess that's the question really is, how often does it happen?
Right.
So first of all, Spencer, to be fair, these ones are interior landscaping,
Yeah,
so.
I saw that.
Is it,
I just didn't seem,
Talk about L, for example.
Well, I, J, K, L, M.
yeah, they weren't even green, so I wasn't sure if that was an asphalt island or a legitimate
Looks like most of them are
landscape.
rock.
But isn't that allowed?
That's allowed.
right,
Doesn't have to be green.
It's just
Yeah,
permeable.
my question isn't like I'm questioning, I just want to make sure that it meets.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's a great point, is we have to look at it, because for every 6 required parking stalls, there's a tree and 2 shrubs required. So there's still some counts that we still have to make. You're right, it doesn't have to be turf, but there are some plantings that are required. You can, the interesting thing about our internal landscape parking lot, this would be 7%. You aggregate the trees and the shrubs, you can combine it. You don't have to have 25 square feet every 6 spaces. You can aggregate together, and there's several priority criteria. We want them to define entrances. We want them to define drive aisle lanes. You know, the last place is in the north corner at the detention pond area that we want to count as internal parking lot. So that has not been fully fleshed out from my point of view. I think they're trying to address it, though, is what I perceive.
Okay.
And then the second question is detention and on-site and sharing. It's both. We have a regional detention basin that functions at the Home Depot, and the whole Target development is sharing that regional detention basin. But if you look over at the bank that's in the center, over by the Wendy's, You'll see the detention basin that sits out by the frontage road as part of the target development. Those are all interlinked. And so we do allow some of that interlinking to go from detention to detention to detention. So the lane will not dump all of their stormwater. It's the overflow amount that's going to be required. So they will contain what they're supposed to contain under the parameters. But I think that's a 10-year storm. But our city engineer will look at the 25-year storm, and we put in the overflow amounts and make sure that they can.
He's keeping track of.
He's keeping track
the
of
running total,
Right.
essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mason?
Just for clarity, you had said the city engineer did receive those calculations. Did he yet verify sufficient capacity? I'm assuming the answer is no.
The answer to date is no, yes.
Wanted to make sure I understood okay, thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Christina, any questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right. No more questions for staff? Then we will invite the applicant to come forward and speak, and you can address any of the items discussed in the staff report, help us understand some of the stuff that maybe we've asked questions about, anything else you'd like to talk about, and sorry for that sun. Right
Yeah, I
in
can
your
see it
eye.
right there, no problem. Jim Flint, 538 North Main Street in Brigham City, Hanson and Associates. The way we got involved in this as an engineer, we were looking for an earthwork grading plan and to get asphalt for inventory parking. So that's how we couched our initial submittal. Everything was geared towards that element. And then, like Corey said very well, after we submitted, it was determined that we needed to look at the overall site plan and the CUP aspects. So the whole shift of the conversation, or most of it, kind of shifts to parking and landscaping towards the good old grading and drainage stuff that we like. And this is hot off the press. He hasn't had time to look at it, and Mackenzie hasn't had time to look at it. And so I thought we'd review it as quickly as possible and get your feedback. If you could look at the site parking plan first. Just kind of a quick rundown. I know it's a little bit, the wording is, we should increase the font size on the right side. The building, 1 per 250 requires 81 stalls. Building's a little over 20,000 square feet. Then thereafter, like Mr. Snyder said, it's going to be 1 stall for every 10, I like to use the word inventory stalls. And so between that, it'd be the 81 stalls for the building aspects. 17 stalls, I mean, patron or client, however you want to say it, would be a 98 stall requirement. The shaded areas in yellow are what we're calling the patron stalls, basically anything closest to the building. And I just noticed something. I'm not too sure why we didn't shade the stalls on the northwest corner. Those are 100 stalls. And so after you achieve the client patron stalls, 98 stalls, then the rest is inventory. That's 153 stalls. So it is a stall-rich environment. And then we have the 88 stalls that correspond with the client stalls, the 4, and then we have an extra van accessible one. So those are, that's kind of the background behind fulfilling our understanding of fulfilling the parking requirement. Landscaping is where it gets really interesting. And the staff report does enumerate, there's a table in the staff report. Let's see, on page 6, I believe. Page 6 of 8, there's a table. So what we did is we looked at what is available right now. And you can see the letters A through P. The site is about 3.9 acres, 171,000 square feet. Engineers love numbers, so don't mean to. Anyway, you add up areas A through P, all those designated landscape areas, and you get about 32,000 square feet, get 19.2%. So on a gross total, we're meeting the 15% requirement. If you look in the table, you'll see a little I right in front of D and E. Those are what we call the islands, what could be classified as the parking lot islands. And so there's various ones. They all add up to only 2,300 square feet. And Mr. Snyder did clarify something for me tonight. The 7% requirement is based on the total parking area. And does that include the aisleways also? The drive aisles?
Yes, it includes the drive aisles associated with the stalls.
Okay, I figured it did, so there's a lot of pavement here. There's 2.6 acres. So the parking lot islands would theoretically need to be, let's see what the number, about 8,100 square feet. So we're knowingly deficient on that. And what we'd like a little bit of feedback on tonight would be if there's any peripheral areas that can count towards that. Like does anything about like there's a inherent really positive aspect of this. That's the west area, the frontage landscaping is well done and planted, mature, and well established. So just kind of nice to have that frontage aspect already handled. So kind of in the back of your mind, I'd be asking you to consider if any of these other lettered areas can be contributory to the parking lot island landscaping. Then we just go down the table, and these are going to be the strict numerical counts. Total of trees, 1 per 500. The requirement is 51. We show 60. Those would need to be verified, but where we're showing a lot of those is a buffer. In the southeast corner, you'll see a buffer area, and that's that 30-foot buffer area. There's a building right there that we do acknowledge has to be removed. So that building will be removed, and we show at least 30 feet on that southeast corner adjoining the CW land, the lane project. And their engineer did contact me, and he did send me the legal document that was signed. And I have reviewed his calculations today, and we don't have an issue with the darker lines in the drainage area. Kind of show the pond expansion. So it is acknowledged that we've got to work some things out, get some confirmations from engineering, but the lane project, it does look like we can incorporate that into this project and make all the drainage work. Let's see, so let's see, then we've got shrubs. That was the street frontage. Interior parking lot, trees and shrubs. So 1 for every 6 stalls. So we're going to need 16 trees and 32 shrubs, and that all needs to be better enumerated. Kind of let the draftsman go to town where he thought things ought to be. And so some of these trees aren't actually in. We do need to do a as existing count with a have to install count. Those are buffer landscaping. We show the kind of considerable treescape along the southeast side there. So those are, that's kind of in a nutshell what I see. I think we meet the landscaping area percentage. We don't meet it on the parking lot island, and we're hoping for a little bit of recruitment areas, for lack of a better term, from some of these other lettered areas. And be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you.
I realize we're going to do a public hearing and that kind of thing.
Well, no, let's, does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Spencer.
On your table, so area N, you've noted the cover is unknown. Is there a reason why you didn't want to identify what you're going to use as cover there?
That's a mistake on our part.
Okay.
We should have declared something.
That's okay. And then on areas B and J, they're landscape areas, but they're also stall areas. I mean, J, you essentially parked a car there, truck there to, as a show vehicle.
Kind of display.
And B, I mean, B is what Land Rover used, and rightfully so for your applicant's use. It's a great showpiece. I don't know,
I can
how I feel. We'll
confess,
talk
B
about
and
it as
J
a
look a
commission,
little bit
but-
suspect for landscape purposes.
yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think those are the only questions that I would have. I appreciate the being conscientious of the residential buffering and evergreens. It looks like they're going to be evergreens. I don't see a tree schedule here, but.
It's, I think they have to be evergreens, my understanding. Yep.
Okay. That's all I've got. Kevin, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Spencer. Anybody else? Any questions for the applicant?
I do have a question for you. I wrote down with regard to trees, you said that there are going to be 51 trees needed and that there are 60 shown on this site. Does that include the trees everywhere, in the middle, on the outside, like completely across the property?
We don't have an accurate count on the frontage landscaping trees, but that would be, that is a composite total number we were thinking.
Okay.
So that would
Including-
include the evergreen trees on the southeast corner is my understanding.
Got it, okay. And presumably it would also include like the trees listed here in K and E and G and H?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that gets into that's an interesting thing. The every 25 square feet, actually I have two questions. One is, if we exceed the 15% landscaping requirement, we have 19.2%. Do we base the required tree schedule on the 15 or the 19.2?
15.
15, good. That's where those numbers came from. Excellent. That was, and the other thing was, does D, in those pockets, every 25 square feet, 1 tree, 2 shrubs? Like what we show like in H, 2 trees there, G, 1 tree? Does that, is the numerical total the main thing that matters? Okay, so D can be, I hate to use the word barren. It's a terrible word to use in a landscaping
Treeless?
environment.
Treeless.
Treeless.
Xeriscaped?
Yeah, xeriscape. Thank you.
Xeriscape,
Good.
yeah. There we go.
Yeah, it's just based on the priorities, so the commission will just look at the major priorities, and then that's where you'll start deciding.
You did some coaching with us.
The best
I think you
place.
told us 75% and some xeriscaping and things. Okay.
Let me ask you a question, going back to what Spencer was talking about with B and J. I've never been to the site. I was never in the market for a Land Rover, but whatever.
Until tonight.
Nice.
Here, he can
I like
take care of it.
Are B and J, are those, like, it's rock and it's meant to be driven on, but I'm assuming that it's like is it just like a stamped concrete, or what kind of rock is it? How does it?
Yeah, I would answer that. In B, Anthony, so.
If you, yeah, would you mind
Sure, absolutely.
stepping up and?
In B, you'll see the section in which you can lightly see 2 vehicles parked there.
Yep.
The darker section on the south side is full of shrubbery and trees currently.
Right.
And also on the north side of B, where they have the mock-up of the trees and such, is currently trees and shrubs. It is a degrading structure in which will be most likely replaced with plants and or trees in the future. It is a stack stone, I guess you could say, that is currently or was there and is now falling apart to where it's mostly weeds as it sits. So we'll probably not be using it continually for a parking structure, as it's a hazard, more so than it is, if we get people, when it was opened,
Yeah.
during the time when no one's there, we found many people trying to go across it, and it's not meant for your average everyday vehicle. It's a specialty course built for off-road vehicles, and so
Yeah.
that could be something considered to be turned into landscaping, needed to be.
Okay. And Jay, kind of a similar thing, or?
J is similar, very small amount as the J, the circle around the J covers. There's maybe a 5 by 10 foot planter area in which there is no foliage of any sort right now. We had to rip it all out when we first moved into the building.
I guess one of the reasons why I was asking is, I think, and Corey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea with rock and other things is that it needs to be permeable versus impermeable, right? Impermeable would not count toward landscaping, but permeable might?
Yeah, the code allows up to, I think it's 20 or 25% of your required landscaping can be in decorative gravel, mulches, and things of that nature. So, but you're right, it couldn't be a parking pad because it doesn't allow, it's, the interesting part here is that we have an old approval, and I don't know what they calculated that against. But yeah, traveled gravel would compact to the point that you couldn't get enough drainage to make it something that somewhat
Or if
equals.
it's stamped concrete to your.
Yeah, or the stamped
Yeah,
concrete.
Stamped concrete obviously is out, but anyway, that's
Well,
my
so if they-
thought, but it
yeah.
sounds like if you're gonna change it, the deteriorating structure, then maybe it's a moot point, but, okay.
Also, to clarify, there was one other thing I'd I'd heard there. N on this map is currently a large grove of trees as it sits
Are
at the
those
time,
like
and that's-
those old Russian olives?
Yeah, very,
Corey, do those,
Oh my goodness.
They are counted as a noxious tree under our ordinance.
yeah, so they would not count as you're doing an as-is survey, they're not gonna count towards your tree total.
okay.
You like them? I hate them. They're the worst.
Yeah, they're terrible.
I'm gonna have to go drive by it, listen.
I wish Heidi were here for that. I mean, she could tell us the definitive answer on Russian olives, but, okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
So qualitatively, where are we? Do you think we're ready?
I
Because
think,
it's been a moving target. Are we still at the moving target stage?
I would say from the parking lot, Highland landscaping, yes. We, the desperation plea is the grading. The grading to
make
get,
it.
the grading to get the asphalt in before the snow flies. That's, anyway.
Okay.
So that's where I was headed. What would happen if we said, let's table this? Tell me what the impact would be.
I'll let Anthony respond to that. We'd be back immediately for your next meeting.
I was gonna say, Corey, what does our next meeting agenda looks like?
It's open. I mean, there's an item scheduled, but it's
Right.
not filled. to the-
And let me just be frank, I think Corey highlighted it. That many TBDs, I walked into this meeting with some pretty significant concerns. And your, let's call it a Hail Mary, was very persuasive. I don't know where I'm voting yet, but I really want to understand, because I know the constraints, I know development constraints, I get it. But I don't want us to punt, if that makes sense. I'm trying to get your sense of where are you, what are the pressures, and just help us understand if this is something we can roll into the next phase of the process, and if we feel confident and comfortable.
Perfect. Can I present this to you? Sure. This is some numbers here that I've got laid out that would help kind of explain what we're doing. And I'll go back to, I'd like to go back to the beginning of when we purchased this land and moved into the dealership. We're a new company. We began in 2020. We have a dealership in Bountiful. We found a great success in that. We were able to expand quickly to the point where we were overfilled in Bountiful. We completely expanded to the point where, as you had mentioned earlier, we were stacking vehicles on top of each other to the point where we had no customer parking and we had no ability to really function any longer. So that was when we came upon this building here in Centerville. Essentially, what this did when we moved in, we trusted some wrong advice and some wrong people saying the wrong things, which was told that we could easily pave this within a month or two of us moving into the building. We contacted a contractor who then assured us of this, and as I'm sure you guys know from the stopping of the construction that was happening. We were completely unaware that this was not permitted, that this was not something that hadn't gone through the city. We had absolutely no idea at that point what was happening. Had we known, it would never have happened. We are not the kind of company that does things and cuts corners and tries. We have the money, we have the ability to do it. We were trying to expand and unfortunately took the wrong advice. That's where this whole, I guess, 6-month or so long project from our side in trying to accomplish this has come from. When we, I guess the desperation plea was, when we began this, we staffed, we planned, we did a lot of things according to having this land and the ability to park these vehicles on this property. We have struggled to maintain our staff, which we have done. We wouldn't let people go or downturn because of our lack of business because of this situation. The desperation more so comes from, in the winter, that dirt lot will become unusable. We won't be able to park vehicles on it. We will not be able to, which we are currently to an extent. It would become a big detriment to the, in our estimate, and not even an estimate, really, our averages show that we would have roughly a 33 to 40% downturn in business. That would essentially, it would be very hard to survive through that.
That's the green 33% winter
Correct.
shrinkage?
Yes. Meaning we would not be able to use that for any sort of parking. Just in the rainstorms we've had over the summer, that basically turns into a muddy swamp and unable to, park there or have our customers walk out to the vehicles in that or slinging mud all over the city streets and or our lot. So with that, what we've come up with here is we expect with this additional parking to be able to increase our revenue by over 40%. It's a big structure with our trucks, which is mainly what we specialize in. They take a little bit more parking than your cars. The current parking lot is set up for Land Rovers and small cars, so our parking isn't quite as easy. That extra open space is what's going to allow us to increase. Currently, we advertise and or list about 150 vehicles on average. We would expect that we would be able to make it over the 220 mark. With that being said, that would increase the revenues of 40%, which, according to the numbers our CFO came up with here, if we were able to do that, do this project and push forward, we would be able to grow in the number in the bottom right-hand corner that you see, which in tax revenue just alone for the city would be a total of $15,522 from our predictions and based on that. Also, it would allow us to keep our staff. It would allow us to continue with the plans that we have to push forward, and that's why we're hoping to get this done before the snow comes down so that we can not only just maintain what we're currently doing, but hopefully to increase revenue for both us, the city, state, and such.
A question for your engineer. So we have landscape and parking plans. How far along are you on your grading plans?
We're very far along. We originally approached this from the cars were already parked on the earthen areas, and you can see them in the photo. So we thought we were just doing a SWIP plan and an asphalt plan. And that's where we, as Anthony.
And some site utilities, correct?
Well, not
Not too
really.
many? You have
Those
a
are-
fire hydrant and maybe some drainage lines?
existing?
Those are existing, yeah. We did all the mapping we could off of the former site plan to know where to come out heads up not to hit certain utilities. But there's no proposed sewer upgrades or water upgrades or anything of that nature.
Mason, are you done with your line of questioning?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's good. All right. Anybody else have any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, gentlemen. This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we invite you to take a seat for just a minute. We might be back to talk to you in a second, but we do need to give the public an opportunity to speak. So,
Thank you.
yep. So we will go ahead and open the public hearing and invite anybody from the public who would like to come forward and speak to this matter to do so. Seeing nobody, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, so back to the commission. So we can obviously discuss this, we can ask staff any additional questions we need to, or the applicant. Or just discuss it amongst ourselves. So I'll start a couple of things. I was really glad, actually, Mason, that you said what you did, because I was waiting for it. I knew it was coming. That being said, you know, and I can be persuaded otherwise, but for me, this is a conceptual site plan, and so the idea is conceptually, does this work, you know? Obviously, vastly different than a final site plan, which does it comply, you know, start to finish, or whatever else. So, in my mind, the applicant does seem motivated and anxiously engaged to get it done, as denoted by the Hail Mary, for lack of a better word. You know, here's an idea, here's some options. So I am inclined to approve the conceptual site plan and move along to the next step and give the applicant time to tighten everything up, get it just finalized, because as it is, there's not a lot of stuff that's gonna move. The existing building is not gonna move. The entry from the front road is not gonna move. You know, so the major features here are not moving. At this point, we're just kind of tweaking some stuff. And I feel like that it will work. It has the ability to work. It's just a matter of getting there. And so I feel inclined to give the applicant the opportunity to get it there, certainly before the snow comes. So, but I'm open to other thoughts, comments, or ideas. Anybody else?
Well, I will say, sort of going informally down the table on page 6 with regard to the landscaping requirements, if I'm understanding and the applicant correctly, if we tick through these, total area landscaping required is 15%, they will satisfy that at 19.2. Total required trees, applicant has determined that's gonna need 51 needed, and they at least right now preliminarily show 60 on their map, so that one's satisfied. The trees for street frontage already are satisfied. I think that the interior pieces here are the ones that are still TBD, but it looks to me like the buffer landscaping has also been satisfied. So we've certainly, assuming that that's all correct, we filled in quite a few of our unknowns. And it really is just limited to the interior parking lot landscaping and the interior parking lot trees and shrubs. Is that the way you guys are seeing it?
Yeah, that's, yeah, thanks for finishing my thought, Shaven.
That doesn't really do anything except for help fill in tables, but, I mean, it's not as uncertain as it was when I walked in.
Well, in my mind, it shows kind of that substantial progress toward completion and, you know, further supports the idea that we're just fine tuning some things because the major parts are there, but.
Spencer, you don't want to go next?
No, I was just thinking through timing. I mean, I want to have this use in the city as soon as possible. So I'm actually figuring out dates to think through that from a developer's perspective and getting it, you know, asphalt down. I was just thinking from a public noticing standpoint, how quick, I mean, we have 2 weeks until our next meeting for them to essentially get us a final site plan, if we approve that tonight. And so our public noticing requirements,
Your final site plan's not a public hearing, so Mackenzie, it's a
I think it's a 3-day notice.
3-day notice?
Does this have to go to city council and only until we final plan it?
No, this is stops at this,
Oh, this is,
it
This
is
level.
administrative.
oh, okay.
For the site plan stuff, it doesn't.
So we don't have to worry about that. then.
So that's why I was kind of scratching my head, Mason. I was kind of thinking through dates, because if it's our next meeting, September 22nd, and they can get final approval, get in for building permit, pull a permit, I don't know how long our review period is
This-
taking right now, max
This-
2
with the
weeks or so. With something that is simple,
I think it's pretty
it should be pretty
quick.
quick. So you could be bidding at the same time, and you could, depending on contractor availability, which is difficult right now, and asphalt availability late in the season can get tricky, but October 6th, somewhere thereabouts, that should give you plenty of time. So I was just kind of ticking through some of those dates on behalf of the applicant, trying to think from their perspective.
So from my perspective, as I've said in other issues of this sort, I don't view a conceptual site plan as simply, well, let me say it this way. The word conceptual, when used in this section of the code, doesn't map fully onto what I think we use as common parlance of conceptual. So I think it's an important step, and I view it as a sort of an important administrative step where we have, although it is administrative, we have a wider range of discretion to make sure that we're hitting all the right notes than we would at a final site plan, unless we build in sort of that thing that we did at one of the others where we said, hey, when you come in for final, let's make sure you also meet all of the conceptual requirements. In some situations, I think that it's important we hold the line. This is not one of them, and it's mostly because you've come in with this. I will say, I'm a little, irked is far too strong of a word. If staff hasn't had a chance to review it, I don't feel properly counseled. So I'm just gonna trust that everything is gonna come out. I'm leaning towards allowing it. But thank heavens that we climbed the hill today, because I came in at the bottom of the hill.
And I sympathize with that, because I don't want to be a developer showing up to a planning commission or a city council meeting saying, yeah, we just got this in, and your staff hasn't had a chance to review it, but let me walk you through it.
But I also understand why, so.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And I understand that this is not as complex as other types of approvals.
Corey, can I ask you just one clarification for my own edification?
Sure.
The total required trees, assuming that the applicant is correct and that they need 51, and assuming for the total interior parking lot trees, that it require one every 6 stalls, that they would need 16 trees, the 16 tree count goes into the 51 total needed, correct?
Correct,
Okay, that's not an in addition to?
correct.
Okay.
And assuming that they have the 19%, that float can, between the 19 and the 15 can figure themselves out with staff on the
The interior.
Right.
display drive-up feature, and whether or not that area J is permeable or not.
Yeah. Chair, if I may, just to explore Commissioner Hayman's question, it's also why we only calculate the landscaping against the required amount, because if you said we're going to require additional trees and other, for your 19%, as a developer, what's the first thing I'm going to do back if I need to pare back the cost?
Yeah.
Cut it back just to the 15, so we don't want to disincentivize, so it's just total lights, landscaping required is going to be 51 trees, and now you disperse those out to your interior parking, your buffering, and your street frontage and leftover areas.
Thanks, Corey.
All right. No? Okay. Anybody else with any further comments or thoughts? So, I'll make a motion, we can talk more about it if we need to, we can vote on this and kind of finalize what we're So, I hereby make a motion for the planning commission to accept the conceptual site plan for the ACC Auto Truck World expansion located at 155 South Frontage Road with the directives 1 through 6 in the staff report and suggested reasons for action A through D.
I will second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
I have a question. Suggested reason A, and this might be a Lisa question. The word clearly, always an interesting word to use. I don't know if I would agree that this is true.
I would take it out.
Okay.
On which one? Sorry,
A.
Mason.
Suggested reason for
Okay,
action
so
A.
strike just the word
Oh.
clearly. Is that correct, Mason?
Yes. Approximately,
Generally?
generally.
I don't even think you have to
Reasonably?
modify it.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, you can
as
just
the-
strike it and leave it alone, can't you?
Leave it alone.
Good catch.
That would be my friendly motion?
Hey, I think when you're chair, you get to decide whatever rules of order that you think are applicable. I'm just saying.
As a former chair.
As a former
As a
chair.
former chair.
You have deference.
I'm just saying.
No, that's fine. I think that's acceptable to me. So we can strike clearly from suggested reason A.
It's a bit pedantic.
Anyway, so here's the thing. Before we vote on this one, I would just say, I don't know how the vote will shake out, pass or fail, but if this does pass, if we do accept the conceptual site plan, the instructions to the applicant would be that when the final comes back, I don't really have much of an appetite to approve a final pending anything. That final needs to be final. Tidy. It needs to be watertight. So that's kind of the feeling that I have on that, assuming that there's an acceptance today for this conceptual site plan. So. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, it's not part of the public hearing, but if you could give any feedback, the parking stalls in the aisles on A, P, O, and N are proximate to those. I'm just wanting some of your feedback on those, towards counting towards parking island landscaping. It could have a significant impact on.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I'll be honest with you, I'm going to refer you to staff on that, to work with Corey, Mackenzie, to figure out, how they can do that one.
To Mason's point, these are the types of things we like to have resolved in advance.
Yeah, and so hopefully that you can get that tidied up with them before coming back. But yeah, that's a really good question for Corey and Mackenzie. Yeah. Okay,
Testament to our staff that we trust you guys this much, too.
that's true.
Going out on a limb tonight.
Far from the truth.
Yeah. Anybody else have any discussion items for our motion? Okay, then we will start down here with Commissioner Summerhays.
Aye.
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 The motion passes. We look forward to seeing you back again with a rock-solid plan, everything all taken care of. So,
Just be glad you're not trying to order joist and decking. That's an 8-month lead time right now.
okay, let us move along then to the next item on our agenda. You guys can go ahead if you want to. You could stick around and listen to the training, but
Awesome picture.
there might be some pictures, but you guys can go, so.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got some land use training from Lisa, and looking forward to going through this with her.
Great.
Just a second.
Thank you. Well, I was gonna try and get you out by 8, but then it kind of
Then we just
kept
talked
going
and
on.
talked.
But this is,
If you can do it in 3 minutes, I give you mad.
Don't
You just
Don't
want,
cut
you
her
just want the
short.
slideshow.
don't cut her short.
Quick, eat the ice cream. No, savor it.
there we go. Okay,
Eat
so,
it.
like Mason, I'm going back 20 years. This is probably my #1 favorite trip was to Antarctica, and it was a third of the price that it is now, but it was an amazing trip. And this is essentially the mode of transportation there. But with that kind of transportation, this is the kind of density you get, which is pretty low density. So yeah, I think that's just a huge walrus, but it's good for the perspective of how huge the icebergs are. And, but then they do have some medium, what I call medium density.
It is campaign season.
But yeah, starter homes. So these are the Gentoo penguins, and they build their nests on these rocks, which is just, it's pretty funny.
This was before housing prices were
Exactly.
astronomical in Antarctica.
Well, or before or after, I don't know. Maybe that's where we're heading, right?
Freed up
let's
more
see.
available land.
Oh, uh-oh, let me go back.
I think so.
Okay, thanks, wait. Anyway, so today, this is only 4 pages, our appeals section, but I do think it's helpful for the planning commission to understand our appeals. The statute requires that if you're going to have the planning commission to make decisions, you need an appeal authority. And the state law allows us to have a hearing officer that a lot of cities have gone to. I don't know about Layton, but we brought that up with Centerville, and they said, no, we like our 5-member board. And so we have a 5-member board of adjustment. We've got a great one. A lot of retired planning commissioners move up to our board of adjustment, which we love. So they're trained. We just call them in because you really have to be an expert on the board of adjustment and standard of review, standing, you know, a lot of things. So we're happy to have them. But the board of adjustment will hear all appeals from any administrative decisions. Legislative decisions that you just recommend to the city council under our ordinances go directly to the court. But any decisions you make can be appealed to the Board of Adjustment, and then they can be appealed from the Board of Adjustment to the district court.
Who serves on our Board of Adjustment right now, Lisa?
So we have Brian Holtz, I don't know if Dave Hershey is still on there, Sappenfeld,
You're reappointed in.
Paula Tu, and Dan Ditto. So we've got a couple attorneys on that, and they were ready to go. They don't get called up very often. They do hear variances, which we don't hear very often. That's the next slide, because it's a difficult standard. Appeals from Planning Commission, which we don't get, and then non-conforming uses. And that's usually what our Board of Adjustment is used for, is to establish and, you know, declare existence of non-conforming use or expansion. So, and the other thing on this slide is this idea of the exhaustion of remedy. So the statute does say that as a condition precedent to judicial review. So before anybody can go to district court over a planning commission decision, they have to go to the Board of Adjustment first, which I like, because the city gets another bite at the apple. And that's what I always say, you know, but the way our ordinances are drafted, it's a review of the record, because we trust our planning commission, so we're just going to take up what you saw to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment's going to look at it and see if it's an administrative decision, if there's substantial evidence in the record. So you'll hear Corey and I or staff always saying, you know, there has to be substantial evidence in the record to support your decisions. That's why those findings are so important, and then those findings have to relate to the record. And, yeah, that one is,
Gosh.
anyway. So the next one is on variances. I'm not sure why variances is in the appeal section, but anyway, variances you don't deal with, except that people are always asking for variances. So you'll hear Corey or I, you know, or the applicant say, well, maybe I can get a variance, because it just means an exception from the ordinances, and they really like to get these, but they're actually quite difficult under Utah law, because you have to show that there's an unreasonable hardship and that there's special circumstances for your property. But that unreasonable hardship cannot be self-imposed, so it can't be a mistake that you made by building your building, you know, within, you know, too close to the side yard within the setback. That's not a variance. And they cannot be economic. So it can't just be more costly. So anyway, I'm always saying, I don't like the variance route, because it's if you really look at the statute, and you analyze the ombudsman's advisory opinions, they're very difficult to obtain. I'm not saying that, you know, some last lots to develop on the hillside, you might be able to get a variance.
Lisa, let's assume that somebody had a frontage and they wanted to put, oh, maybe a corner lot, commercial corner lot where our sign ordinance only allowed them so many signs. They wanted one more sign. What process would they request? Would that be
Well, what
part
would-
of their initial site plan package?
Well, they'd have to show that basically everybody else in that zone was able to get additional signs, and for some reason they couldn't. But just because their lot is smaller than their neighbors, I mean, I'm not sure I can
And I'm not
imagine.
saying size, I'm just saying, well, if our ordinance says this number and they'd like it, I mean, typically we'd say, hey, well, that's the ordinance. But if they ask for it, what is that process?
And I would say they probably just bought, I mean, it would be very difficult to think of a variance that they would get for a sign. But the process would be to apply to the Board of Adjustment, and they have to pay the $250 fee. And sometimes staff will walk through these requirements with them, and, you know, and people are still like, well, I still want to ask for it. And, but our Board of Adjustment has been pretty good about these, but occasionally, I think we granted one variance. I can't remember what it was, but we don't grant them very often.
Actually, the board, years ago when I first arrived, overturned a decision that I still think was wrong. We just decided not to sue the Board of Adjustment.
Oh. Well, yes, because the city can even appeal the Board of Adjustment decision.
Somebody
That's
built
true.
a structure in the side yard with a roof on it,
Yes.
and we said, no, you can't be doing that. And they said, and so they went to the Board of Adjustment, and this was early on, and they said, we said, well, why don't you? He says, well, you're supposed to have it, the yard's supposed to be open to the sky and the sun. He says, well, it's open to the sky if you look underneath the roof and outside, and they granted it. It was like, that one we ought to sue on, but it wasn't worth it, but we've gotten better through the years.
So the other thing that I think's funny by going through all these trips, it's just, everything's related to zoning, but, so this one I just put in because, you know, there's always regulations and, you know.
Chick-fil-A's queue line?
Yeah, sometimes people don't like the regulations, but anyway, whenever you got off the boat, you had to wear your red jacket, you had to wear special boots that went up to your knees, and every time you got on and off the boat, they would spray them for you, because they had a bunch of guano on them, penguin poop. And you could only go on land for 20 minutes at a time, and you could only go, I think we were limited to 30 people. So they were trying to reduce the impact on land at a time, and so I like that. So it was kind of a peaceful experience when you did go on land, and then they also said you can only go here. But these are the kinds of things that you get to see with 30 other people. So it's basically just these whale bones, and they were almost as tall as me. I mean, it was just spectacular. I didn't get to put the head in because I could only use like 6 pictures, but. And then the next one this is a chin strap penguin, and I don't know if it shows close enough, but that's a little chick, but they call them the chin strap because they have the little thing underneath. And as you can see, they like the rocks. They don't build as detailed of a home as the Gen 2, but they're cute. So under the statute, you have to appeal within a reasonable amount of time. And the statute says that if you want to appeal a planning commission decision, you have to appeal it within 10 days unless we specify otherwise in our ordinance. And we say you get 14 days. So, so you get 14 days, and as I said, we recently had an appeal, and in our ordinances, we actually stay any further action on the application. So when we received the Symphony appeal, it halted. We could not accept their final subdivision plat. We couldn't move forward, and so, we tried to schedule that appeal hearing as quickly as possible. But it does take time to collect the record and get it and get ready and get it scheduled. So anyway,
What are other municipality time periods for appeal? 10 days seems really fast.
It does, and,
To
I think
collect all
back in
your
the day, it
information
used to be
to-
like 30 days, everything was 30 days. Like, you'll see, I think even the Board of Adjustment appeal to the district court is 30 days, I believe, under the statute. So, we picked 14 days, because 10 does seem pretty quickly. It is a fast turnaround, and it's not even calendar or business days. Business days, it's 10
Yes,
days.
it's calendar days.
Calendar
Yeah.
days, so, but, you know, if somebody's at the meeting and they know they want to appeal, because it does hold things up. And so, I mean, I guess we could alter our stay provision, because the district court, when you appeal to the district court, it doesn't stay the applicant from moving forward. At that point, it's at their risk. So we could consider, you know, extending the appeal period, but then eliminating the stay provision if we wanted to balance it like that.
Is it just like a notice of appeal? I mean, is it just like a one-page thing I have to file saying, I hereby appeal, and then I could get extra time to gather?
It actually says that they have to submit the appeal and the grounds for the appeal, and they have to raise all issues that they will raise in district court.
That's why I think it's way
So-
too short.
But it can be something as summary as like a notice of appeal, right? Notice of appeal, I raise the following bullet pointed issues, 1, 2, 3. I don't know, I just
But they
never,
have to raise all the points, yes, we don't say how detailed your argument has to be, but we do say that you have to preserve your right to appeal to the district court at this level, the arguments that you're going to make.
So I think that's happened on the Board of Adjustment with appeals. They raised all of their issues on a short summary appeal, but we allowed them time to gather the information after the submittal date.
Yes, yes, and even that one, we did allow them to submit essentially briefs, even in the recent symphony matter. So, but we can certainly look at extending that time frame if you'd like. And then just the point is that the appellant has the burden of proving that the planning commission erred, or the city council, but yeah, or the zoning administrator. Zoning administrator decisions also go to the board. So, and then the standard of review, we do say in our ordinances that it is a review of the record, and so they will just be reviewing your decision for substantial evidence. If it's a question of law, they'll just be reviewing it for correctness. That might be something that I'd like to tighten up in our ordinance, because we did debate quite a bit with the two attorneys in the symphony appeal, what our standard of review is and whether it's on the record. I felt like our ordinances were clear, you know, clearly says it's on the record. So I think this provision now is implemented, but we could tighten that.
what is the symphony matter? Sorry, I'm blanking for a second.
So the Symphony
It's on
Homes
the
is the Summer
easement.
Hill Lanes, and then we had an appeal from the adjoining property owner about the easement.
Access easement.
Oh, that one. Okay, thank you.
And we were ready to go, and then the day of the hearing, it was settled.
Got it, okay.
So they requested to withdraw the appeal.
So it's
But
been
they only
settled, it's
settled
been
it in
settled
terms of the
and,
preliminary.
So it's resolved.
No, they said, no, we'll deal with this at final. This is only preliminary. So it wasn't settled completely. It was only settled.
Yeah, both parties reserved their rights to do whatever they wanted to do in the future, but they settled on the preliminary approval.
And then the Board of Adjustment is the final decision, and then it would go to the planning, to the district court. And so, I don't know, in our experience, I don't think we've ever had a planning commission decision go all the way to the district court. So,
I don't think so. I don't even think, but in the
got a
past,
good planning commission.
earlier than mine, it hasn't.
And then just two pictures from the end. This was one of my favorite ones. I was trying the whole trip because, you know, these guys are just so happy. I mean, if you come back as something else, come back as a penguin, because they're just happy. And I finally got them like jumping in the water. And then this guy was my screensaver for about 4 years after the trip. But you can just sit there and they'll actually like come to you. It's kind of like Galapagos, where they're not afraid of humans. We're not really a predator. So they just find us interesting, and it's kind of fun.
So Lisa, did you go to like New Zealand and then go to Antarctica, or what was your?
We went to
Probably.
Ushuaia at the tip of South America.
Okay.
And then you go across Drake's Passage, which I think everybody on the ship got seasick because it's the worst. I don't think there's any land masses at that latitude, and it's one of the worst crossings ever. Supposedly ours was nice, but yeah, it's a kind of a scary crossing, and then you get, across to the land mass.
Interesting, cool.
Yeah. But it was great. If you get a chance, #1 trip. So I know this is getting a little tedious, so I thought I'd pull out the Antarctica. But we only have two more chapters to go, and the last chapter is, I don't know, some sort of one that we can just scan. It's not that. The next one is on the district court appeal. I thought about combining them, but.
Although the 2001 was very apropos.
I
mean,
know.
Basin started with a commemoration of the 20-year anniversary, and you pull a 2001 trip. You guys
Yes.
coordinated.
It was January, so it was before all of that, but it was definitely, yeah, a sobering event, so. But thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, let's move along then. We've got the Community Development Director's report and City Council report.
Yeah, Chair and Commission, we do have you scheduled. We do have the item of Young Power Sports, which they acquired the Tri-City site and property south of it. It's split between two zones, so they're adding in a rezone petition to bring the properties together as one zone.
The one south of it is the kind of shipping container
Yeah,
area?
shipping container
Okay.
area. That's actually an undeveloped phase along their frontage road, but the shipping container is the building that sits behind that storage area, if you will, and they're bringing those together. Vehicle sales is allowed in both zones. They're just trying to bring those together. So you'll review the neighborhood plan as part of that.
The emerging parcels,
Emerging,
merging the parcels fully? Okay.
that's the plan. And then we have the lane, I think, is not going to be on your agenda. They're not quite ready yet. And I don't know about tonight's agenda. We'll have to talk with them shortly to see if they can make that. The Juarez property is a small subdivision.
It also won't be on
They also won't make it. And then your council report. Lisa and I had a great night over zoning. It was the dog and pony show for, I don't know, the one family was there for items later in the evening, and I think the kids were out on the floor with their blankets and their pillows. They found it quite boring, but but it was engaging for us. They spent, it was nearly what? Hour and a half,
Yeah,
You're- hour and 3/4 on the ADU discussion. That was interesting. And then,
How did that finally?
Tabled it, didn't they?
no, they actually passed it.
Oh.
They want us to bring back a few items to them. They struggled in some of the areas the commission struggled with, the ownership issue. They seem to want to pare that back a little bit, or
Make it more strict? or-
50%.
50%?
Gosh.
Wow.
That was an interesting discussion. They batted around the same conversation.
Yeah.
They
What
just
was the
landed.
rationale there?
They just really believe that you need to live there, and then you had to be committed to the city, and the trust and the split among different entities wasn't the intention of the ordinance. So they felt like if that something becomes a wave of the future, then we'll maybe reconsider it if it's feasible. But they were pretty strong on just saying, you live here, you're committed here, 50%. I mean, I heard even 100%. We had to say, well, what do you mean by 100%?
Yeah, if you don't enjoy tenancy.
Yeah, so they did that. They struggled with the leave items. They want us to bring that back. They had a hard time with the leave items. They like some of them. They don't like some of the other reasonings. The 3 years was a long time for some. Some wanted to pare it back. So it was quite the discussion. They got a little held up on the termination of the idea that you're done with your permit, you terminate it, and you have to restore it to a single-family status, which was, for me, kind of a 180 from what we started from. And now we're going into, oh, yeah, but if you have 2 kitchens, it's okay. And I see their logic, because we argued what constitutes a kitchen, and this is where it got down to the weeds. So it got exciting for me, because this is where people ask me questions all the time. Well, what does it mean? This word, and what does that word mean, and how do you apply that? And so they got into that about dwelling, and then they kind of chose in, well, if you have a second kitchen, that's okay. And they're like, yeah, but now you got a duplex, in theory. So it was interesting conversation, but I don't think we had to beg and plead, but I think the timeline called them to, okay, we'll adopt something, staff, come back with these things, and we've committed to early October to come back and address some of them.
They also expanded it to a
Oh, that's
single-family
right.
home in the RM. Initially, they said, well, why don't we just allow it in any zone? And I said, well, like even in your commercial, and they're like, well, if it's a single-family home, why do we care where it is? But anyway, they pared it back to just AL, RL, and then they added RM.
Interesting.
And they did have some problems with parking in a cul-de-sac, and also maybe that you could only use half the house. But in my opinion, the statute prohibits us from getting into that detail. It says you can require one extra parking stall, or if you can convert your garage, you can add one extra, or, require that. But, so there were a couple things, but I was really glad. This is a big step, and they took the time, and I think we all realized that they probably only had one more meeting to address all these items, so we respectfully requested them to address the issues that were important, but to stay conservative, and then we're going to come back. So we'll come back as a discussion item on those. They had 3 topics that they wanted to revisit, and then we'll have to bring it back as an amendment through the planning commission on those items. So you will, if they want to revisit those, depending on how the October meeting goes, then you'll see some more amendments. But I actually like that process because it's just so hard on the fly and, in the meeting trying to think, oh, what is the impact of allowing them in any single-family home in the city, or not requiring them to do away with, essentially a 2-dwelling, so anyway, I think it's better to allow staff time to think about those things.
Yeah, and I think that it's for 1 or 2, or, I don't want to narrow it down, but some of the discussion, is there still some uncomfortableness with the ADUs, or even I wish we didn't have to do this a little bit I could perceive from some of the comments. And it's about the parking, getting too close to their neighbor, driving down the side of the home if they have to park on the side in an RV area. So I don't think they recognize the state, they recognize their role in it, but I think that there's also a little bit of, could this change the neighborhood? Now, I did report to them, and I think I did to the commission, cities that have adopted the ADUs, they're not getting really more than about 1% of the housing stock. So I don't really think it accomplishes the full intent that this is going to open up a wide variety of affordable housing. And I think when you're dealing with just internal and, living on top of each other, it's hard enough to live with your kids, let alone live with somebody else's kids. I like grandkids, so you can kick them out, you don't have to live with them. But it will work for some people, and I think that's a good thing. And
Well, to that point, Corey, it's already happening, right?
Yes.
Like, people they already have ADUs that are just illicit,
right.
but,
Unauthorized, as I keep trying to say.
okay. Anyway, that's a better word than illicit, but whatever.
Illegal's a harsh one, too.
So passing this ordinance isn't gonna drastically change the neighborhood, because it's already there, in my opinion. And unfortunately, you're not gonna see a great reduction in housing costs because it's already there, it's already built in, so, whatever.
But I do think it's advantage of, like, you could pick up if you wanted to come back to Centerville, if we get the Symphony Home subdivision in at any point in time. That's pretty expensive housing, so if you are somewhat starting into career, somewhat of good pay, but you're probably at that top end, you could do an ADU for 5 years as you build your career, and it works out, vice versa with retirement.
Yeah.
I would go into an ADU, but Jenny says, that's too small to live with you with, so.
Was the city council unanimous in their decision on this one?
As they passed it, yes.
Yeah.
I think some of the details, I don't think they were in a much disagreement. I didn't catch that there was a significant disagreement. There's just,
On some of the issues, I think, the reasons for the temporary absence and, whether you had to convert it at the end. But
some were talking about, well, if you went on a 3-year endeavor, as long as you don't rent out one of the units, we'd be okay. And I was kind of like, well, that's a little out there. If we just accept the time frame and understand that they'll recoup their costs by renting it out, that's just I hate to say it, but that's just going to happen, as you said, Chair Daley. It will happen. So, but it was fun that way. The fence, that was interesting to me because when they first proposed it, it didn't seem like there were significant problems with the corner lot fence issue. And ended up a 3-2 vote. That one's kind of like
3 favor or 3 against?
3 for it and 2 against it. And I kind of went, maybe the ADU took too long. So I don't know, but it was interesting. I think it was good. I like the conversation because it shows you how somebody can look at it from a state level, which, sometimes I'm pretty critical of the state because I'm down in the weeds. But I think overall, the state generally, there's a lot of disagreements you make, but generally, most people are trying to do something that they think is better, even if I disagree with them. They're trying to do something better. It just shows you that when it gets down into where you live, each community is different, the tolerance levels are different, the worries and concerns are different. Maybe Moab City during the bill, it's like, wow, this will turn everything into short-term rentals. This won't end up as ADUs. So, the state tries to accommodate it, but then it comes down to, okay, it has to be owner-occupied. Well, both bodies. Owner-occupancy, what does it mean? Are you an owner if you can qualify as a voter? Are you an owner occupied if you can, finally get a driver's license or you're expected to get a driver's license? Or, there's all kinds of definitions of, are you the primary owner so you can get a reduction on your taxes for your home? How long do you have to live in it before it becomes your primary residence? All those things are debatable.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting, just hearing the detail analysis from the planning commission and the city council, that, when a mandate for essentially a new kind of housing stock that we hadn't anticipated, like, last night was really great discussion about these side entrances. And, Corey had a requirement that, hey, it's gotta be in your 10-foot side yard, and they're like, well, no, let's do the 8, and then he finally had to say, well, wait a minute, the reason we said on the 10-foot is because you're gonna have 3 feet. If you have an overhang, the minimum is 3, and then for public safety, you need 6. So now you're at 9. But what if cities have like a 5-foot? I guess they could say, you can only have your entrance to your ADU in the front. I suppose you could do that.
Or the
But anyway,
back.
it was an interesting, every little detail was, this is why we don't mandate land use or, a new housing stock, really, because it is complicated and it's difficult, because we're essentially retrofitting our existing, it's a new product that we haven't, we didn't get to analyze where we're gonna put it. So,
Interesting.
but not that I'm against ADUs, and hopefully it will be more than 1%. I do hope it helps with the housing stock.
Yeah, and I do too. 5 years ago, I would not have predicted that the work home movement would have turned into what it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are things you just can't anticipate. Housing prices will go up. Will it be just economically, not about whether I want to live with someone, but it's the way I make it economically by investing into a home. And, it could grow like rapid fire work for home at some point. So,
Yeah, who knows? Maybe work from home will relieve the pressure of living so close to the urban center and.
redistribution of housing, we've talked about at the planner conferences, all of a sudden it's easy to go down to Helper, Utah, to the artistic district, the arts district of Helper. If you've ever been down there, they're reinventing themselves. And you only need to come up to Salt Lake City once a month, once a quarter. Now I can go down there.
Transportation.
Yeah.
Reduces your transportation expense.
Yeah, now I can go down there, spend most of my time in a smaller town, if I'm, mobile and capable enough, and I can only have to go up once in a while to Salt Lake. So we call it, the redistribution of housing, what kind of trend that is. If you're, I have a son who's a programmer, and he's been in Thailand for 6 months and programming from there. Weird sleep schedule for him to stay on company time.
Yeah.
And it's not Thailand, Taiwan. I think of Thailand because I hear how great it is, but he went to Taiwan. So, these are the things we don't know when we plan ahead. We're making our best educated guess. But it was a good discussion. I enjoyed it immensely, even though for some in the audience, it was torturous, like our city engineer. So that's my report. I should have stopped 29 minutes ago.
It's all right. Thanks, Corey. All right, let's move along then to the last thing on our agenda. We've got some minutes to go over from our last meeting, which was actually July 28th. Kind of crazy, but it's true. So let's review these page by page. It's short, 4 pages. Anybody have anything on page 1 they would like to bring up? Page 2, I've got a couple of things on page 2. First of all, the easy one, line 47, it says fences and walls. I think we're missing an A there. More importantly, though, previous to that, the discussion about ADUs, that was a public hearing, but there's no mention of the public hearing anywhere in the minutes. And unfortunately, I didn't go back and figure out, but I think that was right, anyway. So maybe we need to go back and add the public hearing into the minutes just to show that we did it, because I'm certain that we did it, so. Okay.
Yeah,
Anything
good catch.
on page 3? Page 4? Okay. We'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
See,
That was fun. Wait.
Gavel drop.